All right, hello and welcome everyone. In this week's office hours, November 15th, we're going to be talking about the release of Open Policy Agent version 046.1. This new version brings a couple new features. The first one here is a new language feature called refs in rule heads. So essentially what this is doing is allowing us to reconfigure how we have our packages structured. Previously, you may have had your packages using this example in front of us, right? Package method might have been before package method dot get with the default rule allow. With the new refs and head rule, this allows you to split up or combine your packages. Combine your packages so that you can have, if you did have two packages like method.get and method.post, and each of them having allowed rules, now you can combine them into one package where you define the allowed rule for each of those sub packages directly in the rule head. So now you can have get.allowed and post.allowed in the same method package instead of dividing them into two separate packages. This new language feature does come with a couple things to be aware of. You have to make sure that when you are specifying a variable inside of the rule head, when using these dots, the variable has to come at the end. You can't place this variable anywhere in the middle. This will generate an error. So you want to make sure that any of those variables do happen at the end of the rule head. Other than that, I would say definitely check out the documentation and raise any questions if you have them. Next up is the entry point annotations. Entry point annotations are, it's new to the annotations feature, but it doesn't change any of the functionality of entry points. Entry points are used in a variety of places. Here's a quick list: when you are optimizing bundles, when you are creating WASM bundles, when you're doing a plan bundles, or just trying to do optimizations with OPA eval. And so now the only difference this adds is that you can add this point into the metadata so that it can be referenceable inside of the policy itself. And then two new built-in functions this release. The first one is the GraphQL schema is valid. So pretty simple here. I have two schemas. The first one here is just pulled out of our GraphQL quick start tutorial. And the second one is just a malformed version of that. So right with this, we can see that this first schema passes our GraphQL test. And then the second schema here, where we are not defining the type query, fails our valid schema test, as we can see, defined by the not in front of the rule and receiving a true status for the overall rule selection, or for the overall rule. Last new built in here is the CIDR is valid. And so this does pretty much exactly what you think it will do. It will check that the CIDRs that were provided are actually valid CIDRs. So here I have 4 CIDRs in the input. First one, 1234/24, very simple, very easy to see that one's true. The second one here, 456 2.2.5/128. Everything behind the 456 looks good, but obviously this is too high of a number. The third one here comes back as true. And then the last one here with the 123, 123, 123, 123, and then a fifth 123 comes back as false. So with that, pretty simple. These are all the new built-in functions and language features for this release. Thank you for listening. Oh, hey, we got a couple people listening in. Cool. How's it going, Zachary? How's it going, Philip?
Great. How's it going for you today?
It's pretty good. Always fun to announce new things and not broken things.
Indeed.
Cool. So that was yeah, a quick layout of what's going on in 426. Zach, did you have any questions or comments? Could be about this or could just be about OPA in general.
I did have some questions in general, but nothing about what we've done here so far.
That's fine. So like the first bit of this office hours is to announce new features. The second bit is the normal office hours to just talk about anything anyone has to bring up.
So I guess mine is going to be a little bit more. Are you familiar with Chef Z and how they do their authorization at all by chance?
Chef Z. I know Chef as an automation company. Is there?
Yeah, there. So we kind of did something very similar to them, where rather than having a policy that's in Rego, we've got a framework written in Rego that we can pass in a policy as a JSON file. And we're posting that to, or we're putting that into the bundle. And then what we've done actually is a user is, I don't know if this is, and I guess I'm asking for some advice if you think this is wise or not, but essentially our application is pretty small. Maybe only have about 1,000 users. Each user has a GUID as their ID. And each user has access to, like, we'll say it's an account. And each account has an integer ID. So we've made our policy in a framework in Rego, so that way we can pass in a policy file. And the policy file is just a key value store where the key is a user ID. And the value is an array of accounts that they may have. And they may have at most 300 accounts. So 1,000 users, 300 accounts, and we're bundling that with the framework code with our policy file. So in terms of performance, we were running into some issues because we were iteratively checking if a user had access to 300 accounts, and now we're doing a bunch of like set logic. Have you experienced anyone doing something similar to this or anything like that? I'm afraid in terms of data, like I don't think it's so much, but I don't know how OPA will handle like scaling at that level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And so that, yeah, like, so I guess that's interesting. So you're preemptively looking if these users have access. You're not doing this at runtime where you're trying to see if they have access as they're trying to access the system. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so the policy file is just a JSON file, very simple. And we've got like some of our own custom way of replacing what we call like variables in there. So essentially the idea is, again, is at runtime, we wanted to be able to change a policy if necessary and remove and change a user's access to a specific resource, right? So, user has access to 300 accounts, they're no longer with the company, or they decided to delete their account or whatever, they should no longer have access to any of those resources. So we've got another background process, lack for a better term, that is constantly updating the source or where that bundle file is being generated from. And so whenever that change happens, OPA will automatically pull. We have another sidecar essentially that OPA pulls the bundle from. This additional sidecar is generating the bundle. So we don't have to actually so during runtime, users' access to resources are going to automatically update. And so for a small scale set of 1,000 users at 300 accounts, I think that's okay. But
yeah, and so not using this method, but the same like logic, NVIDIA has built something. We're about to release a video where they kind of explain how this works. And so they created I think they just used the SDK to wrap around OPA to create their authorization system, and essentially any sort of changes as far as data access or resources, right? All that stuff hits the same program, and so like authorization basically changes almost instantaneously. So that would be a fun one to check out. I think we're going to be releasing it either end of this week or beginning of next week.
That sounds very cool, actually.
Yeah. But Philip, I saw you go off mute for a second. Did you have a comment that might be helpful for now?
No, I have seen some folks attempting to do a similar thing, kind of like building entitlements kinds of systems. The problem is that, yeah, if you have like giant arrays and you're having to iterate over them, that is going to be slow. That is currently done entirely sequentially in OPA last time I checked. So you may sit there for a second. Most of the set operations are fairly fast in newer versions of OPA, but yeah, if you're having to do a bunch of comprehensions or like slow, like, one item at a time iterations, you're going to bog down a little bit if you got a huge number of items times a huge number of items you need to check.
Yeah, that was exactly what we were running into, where we had set iteration or set comprehension running, and then that was triggering another function that ran set comprehension. So we did end up having a O(n) squared computation. So we did revert that to using actual set logic. So we're just comparing the sets rather than checking if each individual item's in the set, and we've gotten much better performance. But one thing that we're not able to do now is use partials. I don't know much about partials. I looked at that a little bit, but we were able to use partials before, but it was still, the performance wasn't great. But now we don't have the ability to use partials. And I think with our data set, I'm only getting, so before it was like 30 seconds, which was abysmal. Now we've got it down to 20 milliseconds. So I think it's the trade-off is okay, but I'm kind of concerned like for longevity, like.
Yeah. So 2 questions. What version of OPA are y'all on currently?
We are actually on 46.1.
Awesome. Okay. That I always have to ask that because sometimes people will be on like an ancient version of OPA. And occasionally in the old ones, there's like performance regressions or, cases where just there are no optimizations on a certain code path. So, okay, if you're on a modern version, that's helpful. I consider like bad performance to be a class of bug all its own. If you're able to distill down like a test case that is not your actual data, but representative of it, I would love to see something like this on the bug tracker as this is not performant, but we really wish it was. Or like an illustration of like when the partials break down. That would also be super useful. Because I may be able to construct an example myself just from the description, but if y'all have something that's like almost ready to go and with just a little bit of doctoring could be made into like a demoable example, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, what I can actually do for you is I can abstract it out. So I can write a bug report on the OPA on the GitHub, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. So the policy will probably just be a Rego policy rather than like our framework policy. But then I can show you kind of what we're trying to do with the user and what an array of resources that they have and duplicate that. So I can do that.
That would be excellent, because even if we see that it's not necessarily a bug in how OPA is working, it is a pattern that I've seen about 2 or 3 times now. And so if it's a common enough pattern that multiple people have run into it and suddenly have performance issues, this is something that the OPA team may end up addressing either at the language level or with better optimizations or something. So
okay, yeah, I can definitely do that, because this is, I acknowledge, a pretty unique way of doing things, because a lot of what I've seen is like RBAC authorization, like,
right,
parts of JWT, check what the user's role is, check the actual resource that they're trying to access, do they have the role for that access? Bam, approve or deny. But we're actually trying to see, we are using OPA almost, so we've got redundant security in that multiple layers, so OPA is like not necessarily our only authorization layer, but where users have access to a specific resource. But we are doing that in that, given a list of users, which may be N, and then a list of resources that each user has access to, M. I was not really finding many examples around that. So
okay,
that's how we are using it.
Yeah, that is an interesting use case. And so, yeah, if y'all are running into performance issues, I'd love to see a GitHub issue about it, just so that we can actually look at it and see, like, is there anything easy that can be, or relatively easy that can be fixed to make things, better performance-wise for y'all? And if there's not, do we need to make structural changes in the evaluator or the compiler to try and make things faster,
Right.
So,
Makes perfect sense.
yep.
Yep, I can definitely do that. I'll work on that. I don't know if I'll have that today or something, but I'll get.
Honestly, whenever you have time, we would appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the fact that you guys are doing all this, working on this, and I'm an end user, and it's an amazing product, and I love working with it. It's a little weird at first, I'm not gonna lie,
Mhm.
trying to get used to it, but when I did, I was like, damn, this is so smart. So yeah,
Awesome.
cool.
All right.
All right, well, that's all the questions for today. Thanks for joining, Zach. Thanks for joining, Philip. Yeah, see you guys next time.
All
Thank
right.
you guys very
Take
much.
care.
Have a great day.